This week, we told you about a group of low-income renters facing eviction because of their window air conditioning units.
If I don't have it out by July 31st, I will be evicted on the 1st.
Well, so many of you responded saying you want to help. And today, those renters got brand new floor AC units thanks to a generous donation.
Thank you so much. You just have no idea how much this has impacted our community here.
I felt very bad for them and
Thank you so much to everybody.
I wanted to help them.
Plus, as the climate has gotten warmer, more and more Oregonians have installed AC in their homes. If you can believe it, Portland now has almost the same percentage of air conditioners as Los Angeles.
Definitely the weather climate's changed in Portland since I was a kid.
Here's the story.
Welcome to The Story. I'm Christine Pitawanich in for Pat Doris. All the ways to communicate with us are right there at the bottom of your screen. You can email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com. You can also use the hashtag TheStoryKGW on Twitter, or hey, leave us a voicemail. Just call us at 503-226-5090. Tonight, our big story, once again, is this historic stretch of 100-degree weather. About an hour ago, we found out the Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office is reporting at least 2 suspected heat-related deaths. Right now, we really don't have a whole lot of information about where those deaths happened or even how, but we'll keep you updated once we know more. It is, though, a stark reminder of last year's heat dome when almost 100 Oregonians died of hyperthermia. Of course, this really underscores the importance of keeping cool. And earlier this week, we introduced you to a group of women at a low-income apartment complex in Newberg. They got eviction notices for having window air conditioning units. The housing authority said the units were fire hazards and weren't up to code. The tenants were told they could have portable units, but the kicker there is that they couldn't afford them. Now, after hearing the story, dozens of you, our viewers, stepped up to help. Blair Best has the update.
To everyone's surprise, many of you reached out to us asking how you could help. Well, one man did, buying 3 portable units for the women in Newberg. And we caught up with him this morning when they were being delivered. Take a look.
Beating the heat.
Where would you want to just bring him in here?
Yes, please.
Okay, we have 2 more in the van.
One kind gesture at a time.
Thank you so much.
Lord bless you.
Bless you.
Portable AC units paid for and delivered for free.
Thank you so much. You just have no idea how much this has impacted our community here. Thank you.
We're just all uplifted.
Yeah.
It's done amazing things, not just cooling our house, but warming our hearts.
Awesome. It's a good day. It's a miracle day.
The man behind this miracle day is Kim Stark, who, after seeing our story of these women facing eviction over AC units in their windows, decided to step up and donate.
I felt very bad for them and I wanted to help them.
He spent $1,500 on 3 portable AC units, the kind the housing authority allows.
I'll share what I have with people, you know. I wish I was wealthier because I'd buy more air conditioners for everybody here.
I was amazed. I was flabbergasted.
Norman Chusid runs Akeney Hardware, where Stark bought the units.
We're happy to deliver them for free and get them brought into each unit. And so that's what we did today.
This is my new air conditioner that I get to put in today. I'm so excited.
Nikki Sherman will finally sleep well tonight after weeks of suffering without AC.
I won't get migraines because I'll be cool. I won't get as many. My legs and feet swell when it's hot, and so I won't have to deal with that as much. This just took such a big load of stress off our shoulders because we've been so worried about losing our housing.
A tenant's right to having AC has been a hot topic for state lawmakers. They took action back in March, passing a bill allowing tenants the right to install AC in their apartments. But as Representative Pam Marsh, who chairs the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, points out, it's laced with restrictions and still needs work.
Conditions on the ground are changing in a way that we have to make sure Oregonians are safe.
After last year and the people dying from the heat, they need air conditioning.
State lawmakers have only just started this discussion around a tenant's right to AC. And with these rising temps, it's becoming more of a pressing issue. So they're looking for your feedback. If your lease doesn't allow you to install AC units, contact your state rep. Blair Best, KGW News.
So you heard Blair mention restrictions in the state's new AC law. We read the actual text of that bill that passed, and yes, there are a lot of ways landlords can still ban AC units. Take a look for yourself. The bill reads, a landlord may not prohibit or restrict a tenant from installing or using a portable cooling device of the tenant's choosing, but then there's a list of exceptions to that rule, like if the AC unit violates building codes, which is what the housing complex in Newberg claimed, or if the unit violates state or federal law, or if installing it would, quote, damage the premises. Then there's this part about window AC units specifically. Landlords can ban them if, quote, the device requires the use of brackets or other hardware that would damage or void the warranty of the window or frame, puncture the envelope of the building, or otherwise cause significant damage. The thing is, many window AC units need to be screwed in so they don't fall out. And those units are significantly cheaper than floor AC units, which is the problem those low-income tenants in Newberg ran into. They couldn't afford the kinds of units that were actually allowed in their complex. In the meantime, the city of Portland has a new program installing free cooling units in low-income homes this summer. That includes both heat pumps and portable air conditioners. We've been keeping an eye on their progress. So far, 909 units have been installed. That's 30% of the way to their goal of 3,000 units. We'll keep checking in on this during the summer. Now, these cooling units are being distributed by community groups who are the ones determining eligibility. If you are elderly, live alone, have a medical condition, or meet the low-income program requirements, you can call these phone numbers right there on your screen. So grab a pen, grab your phone to put them in. You can reach the African American Alliance for Home Ownership, or AAAH, at 503-595-3517, or call Verde at 503-290-8570. And of course, be sure to pass these numbers along to anyone you know who you think might qualify too. So for decades, many people in the Portland area, in the Pacific Northwest really, didn't have air conditioning because they just didn't really need it that often. It wasn't worth the investment for only a handful of very hot days a year. But now, nearly 8 in 10 Portlanders have some form of AC. As Kyle Aboshi shows us, that number has increased with the changing climate.
Want to know about heat?
I'm dripping.
Talk to Kim Tidyman, the service technician from Jacobs Heating and Air Conditioning, has spent decades working to bring Portland residents relief by fixing their AC.
You're definitely appreciated.
And these days, there seems to be more demand than ever.
I think it's becoming a necessity.
According to the U.S. Census, air conditioning has surged in Portland over the past decade. In 2011, 41% of all homes were air conditioned by either central air or window units. By 2015, that number jumped to 69%. As of 2019, the most recent data shows 78% of all Portland homes have air conditioning. That's almost on par with Los Angeles. So why the dramatic increase? For one, it's gotten hotter here.
It's definitely the weather climate's changed in Portland since I was a kid.
Another factor could be newcomers. Real estate agents say homebuyers coming from out of town often ask if a property has AC, which is the norm just about everywhere else. A closer look at the numbers shows there is disparity. Census data suggests white and Asian households are more likely to have air conditioning than black households. And renters?
Renters are far less likely to have access. Yeah.
Ethan Shurigan of Portland State's Population Research Center can explain.
So owners are more likely to invest into central AC. That's something that increases their home equity. Whereas for renters, that's going to be a sunk cost. So they're very limited sometimes in what they can put in.
Despite the fact that nearly 8 of 10 Portland homes have air conditioning, it's important to note there are still nearly 200,000 households without it. For some, air conditioning is a necessity that keeps people from heat stroke, exhaustion, or other heat-related illnesses. Case in point, last summer's record heat wave that killed more than 70 people in Multnomah County. The vast majority of those people didn't have working AC. Over the weekend, Oregon Health Authority teamed up with community groups to deliver 500 AC units to those in need. They hope to get 3,000 units distributed by the end of summer. All this AC does require energy. PGE reports energy consumption on Tuesday, when temperatures reached triple digits, exceeded Portland's April freak snowstorm. Further proof, when the temperatures rise, more and more Portlanders are cranking up the air conditioning. Yes, Portland has seen a surge in air conditioning, but we're still below the national average. Nationwide, 91% of U.S. homes have air conditioning. Kyle Boshi, KGW News.
Yeah, my childhood home in Washington, no AC and it was fine, but these days not so much. But speaking of our warming climate, Chief Meteorologist Matt Zaffino here to talk a little bit more about how this changing climate is impacting the heat that we're all experiencing right now, Matt.
Yeah, that's right, Christine. This is an area of science called climate change attribution, and it is a quickly growing area in climatology. And the reason for that is it's the question that we get all the time whenever there's a heat wave or any extreme weather event. Is this caused by climate change? I mean, that's the simple question, but it's a very, very complex answer. And our friends at Climate Central developed something called the Climate Shift Index to try to shed a little light as to what the influence of climate change is on any particular weather event. And you have to be careful when you do that because, of course, we get variations and extremes in weather even if we weren't adding any CO2 to the atmosphere. But, of course, we have been for over 100 years now. So this is the Climate Shift Index for tomorrow, for high temperatures tomorrow. And it's not saying that the heat that we're going to experience tomorrow is because of climate change. What it's saying is the heat that we're going to experience and have been experiencing is far more likely because of climate change the higher you go on the scale. Now, for Western Oregon tomorrow, we're a 2, a climate shift index of 2. For parts of eastern Washington, it's up in the 3-4 category. And what that means is for us on the 2, that means that the weather we're going to have tomorrow, the temperatures we're going to have tomorrow are twice as likely to occur because of global warming. That's what this means. So it's not saying this is because of global warming. It's saying that the frequency of an event like this happening is twice as likely in this case, or in the case of eastern Washington, about 3 times as likely. Here's what that scale looks like. And again, for the 2, for a climate shift index of 2, which is what we will be under tomorrow, it means that it's twice as likely that we would have temperatures like this because of our warmer climate. Now, if you look at the heat wave, the heat dome that we had last year, I'm going to get the number on this, but I'm sure it was in the 4 or 5 category, which means it was basically almost impossible to happen without a warming climate and a warmer atmosphere. There's still a lot of research being done along those lines. It can also go the other way, too. It can mean that it's 2 times less likely to have cooler than normal conditions on the scale, too. So it's an interesting new tool just being developed. It's called the Climate Shift Index from our friends at Climate Central. And what they do is, and now we're really going to get granular, Christine, and get into the weeds and how they do this. They take climate models and they run 22 different runs of that climate model. And they do it first with greenhouse gas emissions and then also without greenhouse gas emissions. So you've got 22 pairs of climate models, and then they tease out the number from that. And they average that with another method where they just use observed temperatures over the last 30 years, and they take out the contribution of our warmer average global temperatures, so we can get a sense for like, okay, well, what's the difference between that and if we had no global warming? Then they average those two and come up with a climate shift index. So there's some pretty elaborate and complex statistics and math and computer modeling that go into this, but it's interesting to be able to boil it down to a number like that. So we'll keep you posted on this as it develops. Okay, so far we've had 11 90-degree days this year. The annual average is 13. But again, we're only not even through July, and we're going to eclipse 13 by the end of the week. This streak will likely hit 7 days. That would be Saturday. I think we stay below 90 on Sunday. Finally. And of course, we'll have more on that for you. The forecast at 6:30, Christine. I know that got a little complex, but climate change is a complex subject.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to look, years ahead. I mean, we'll see how those graphs change, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this that's a very good point, because this science will continue to evolve and become more sophisticated as time goes on.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt. So with temperatures this high, there are some really big concerns for people who work outside in the heat. You might remember a farm worker died in last summer's heat wave. This year, there are new state work safety standards aimed at protecting employees from the heat. Here's Alma McCarty.
With the sun beating down and temperatures rising above 100 degrees, intense manual work becomes even more difficult. That's especially true for farm workers. Here's Ira Coyo-Martinez, Policy and Advocacy Director for PACUN, Oregon's farm worker union.
You're constantly moving, doing repetitive motions, having to bend down, and there aren't many shaded structures when it comes to the fields.
Just last year, Sebastian Francisco Perez, a migrant farm worker providing for his family back in Guatemala, died while installing irrigation pipes during the heat wave.
Sebastian was working by himself during this heat wave and wasn't found until late after the fact that he was missing and not showing up. That's very concerning that anyone would, work outside in excessive heat in 90 plus degrees, 100 plus degree weather, and the employer or other workers not knowing necessarily what they're doing or how they're experiencing working in those conditions.
Tragic cases like this and other instances of heat illness across the state prompted leaders to act. Oregon OSHA created requirements to further protect people who work outside exposed to high heat or inside without a ventilation system.
They implemented the brand new rules that took effect on a permanent basis starting on June 15th, 2022.
Paul Cerner, an employment attorney, explains if the heat index is 80 degrees, employers need to provide access to shade and cool drinking water. When it hits 90 and above, additional requirements kick in. Those include more breaks, more frequent communication, and monitoring everyone more closely for heat exhaustion and heat stroke.
That might be a buddy system for employers where they only have maybe teams working together on a site where it's really remote, or where the supervisor's going around doing round checking in on the employees.
One of the biggest areas of concerns and that this rule actually addresses is working by yourself in those conditions, because then no one can see if someone passes out or they are just excessively sweating and not necessarily taking the breaks that they should be.
OSHA inspectors will be checking on employers all summer to see their plans for protecting workers. Employees who feel rules aren't being followed can also submit complaints directly to the state without fear of retaliation. Alma McCarty, KGW News.
Still ahead, Portland is considering a new kind of technology that could help stop the city's ongoing problem with gun violence. But in other parts of the country, that technology has led to lawsuits. We'll explain when the story continues.
Welcome back to The Story. As always, we love to hear from you. So keep sending your questions, comments to thestory@kgw.com, or hey, give us a call, leave a voicemail at 503-226-5090. So we've told you how the city of Portland is considering gunshot detection technology as another way to fight gun violence. A police oversight group recommended ShotSpotter to the mayor's office earlier this month. It's a company that sets up sensors around the city that listen for gunshots. While Portland leaders think about whether it would be worth it and where it could be used, there's another crucial part here. How would ShotSpotter alerts be used in prosecution? Evan Watson looked into it.
I've covered the use of ShotSpotter as a reporter in other parts of the country. Police often tell me it can inform them about shootings that aren't called in through 911 and help them get to the scene of a shooting faster. But when police arrest someone for a gun-related crime, is ShotSpotter evidence enough?
ShotSpotter uses sensors to listen for potential gunshots, sending police to areas looking for evidence of a crime. In 2020, Chicago police arrested Michael Williams for murder, using a ShotSpotter alert as critical evidence. After Williams spent a year in jail, a judge dismissed the case after prosecutors argued there was a lack of evidence. Now, Williams, through the MacArthur Justice Center at Northwestern University, is suing the city of Chicago for damages. The lawsuit also seeks a court order ending the use of ShotSpotter in Chicago. So it begs the question, how might ShotSpotter alerts be used in criminal prosecution? On its website, ShotSpotter says its evidence and witness testimony has been successfully admitted in over 200 court cases in over 20 states. ShotSpotter denied a report from Vice News that the company has altered evidence at the request of police departments and prosecutors. It sued Vice for defamation, but in June a judge dismissed the case. So if Portland decides to try out ShotSpotter, how would prosecutors use ShotSpotter evidence? The oversight group that recommended ShotSpotter to the mayor's office says this: relying solely on technology and algorithms can create harmful and costly mistakes, as made evident by the case of Michael Williams in Chicago. FitCog recommends that ShotSpotter data be used in addition to, not in lieu of, other criminal forensic and investigative evidence in the prosecution of gun violence cases. Specifically, a series of legal rules and guidelines should be created to protect against ShotSpotter data being considered the only admissible evidence needed to prosecute such cases. Mayor Ted Wheeler and council members will decide whether the city should contract with ShotSpotter. Evan Watson, KGW News.
The lower Snake River dams in Washington state have been a source of controversy for years. The big question is, should we keep them and all the electricity they generate, or get rid of them to protect salmon? Oregon researchers are weighing in when the story continues. Welcome back. Earlier this month, we told you about 2 new reports from the White House saying the lower Snake River dams may need to be removed to help restore salmon populations. So those 4 dams here are in the southeastern corner of Washington state and have been a target of environmental groups for years. Now, researchers at Oregon State say they agree breaching those dams would help the salmon. Here's Joe Ranieri.
Bringing back a fish population that has been struggling over the last few decades isn't an easy task. But a new study suggests breaching 4 dams along the lower Snake River basin could help.
Breaching the dam just in the main stem Columbian snake essentially means removing the earthen portions of the entire structure that spans the river.
Adam Storch works as an analyst for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. He says breaching the dams would require the removal of some rock and sand that lies around the 4 dams along the river. Those are the Ice Harbor, Lower Monumental, Little Goose, and Lower Granite.
Embankments, basically. So the idea is essentially to remove those embankments so that their water can flow around the dam, the remaining portion of the dam freely.
Breaching the dams would also allow for the fish to swim around the dams. Storch says timing is everything as these fish come down the Snake River and eventually into the Columbia.
Their progress is slowed, and essentially, with that, they're susceptible to a bunch of, kind of deleterious things like predation, high water temperatures, things like that.
The longer these fish are trying to get through these dams, the higher risks they face, including disease. But making an easier route for them,
that is a huge driver of survival from the work we've done.
Could help this fish population grow again.
That was Joe Ranieri reporting the Biden administration would have to approve the removal of those dams, and so far they have not made any decision on how to move forward. All right, keep sending your questions, comments to the story at kgw.com. Still ahead, how you can help the most vulnerable members of our community during this heat wave. For this week's Hey Help campaign, we're asking you to donate to the Arches Project. It's part of the Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, which in part helps homeless people living in the Salem area. This week, they're making sure people living on the streets stay cool. And if you'd like to donate, just open up the camera on your phone, point it right there at your screen, shoot that QR code, and then you can go to kgw.com/heyhelp. This is a micro donation drive, so feel free to give any amount because no matter how small, everything helps. Well, that's it for us tonight. Thank you so much for watching. The news at 6:30.